Welcome to OOTO-TV, the out-of-the-office investigation from the past into the future of health. This time, we're discussing AI ownership. My name is Bob, and I'm here with Sue to explore what might be the single biggest question of our digital future.
My name is Sue, and that's exactly right, Bob. We're diving into a revolution that's unfolding right under our noses. You know, when a machine creates something new, a piece of software, a work of art, a story, who actually owns it? Is it the person who typed in the prompt, the corporation that built the AI, or could it be someone else entirely?
It's a massive legal and philosophical minefield, for sure. In our investigation today for OOTO-TV, we're going to follow the evidence and try to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so let's start with this. We are smack in the middle of a quiet but unbelievably fast revolution. Machines aren't just helping programmers out anymore. They are actively writing the code that runs our world. And that number you see, 40%, that's our ground zero. GitHub, which is the largest software development platform on the planet, is saying that 4 out of every 10 lines of new code now has AI's fingerprints all over it.
And Bob, we have to be really clear here. That number is just staggering, and it's growing exponentially. This incredible explosion in productivity is being cheered in every boardroom, but it's creating this huge legal and philosophical vacuum. It's like we're building our entire digital future on a foundation that doesn't have any clear property laws.
Exactly, Sue. And look, don't just take our word for it. Professor Lawrence Lessig absolutely nails the problem here. Our whole system of copyright and intellectual property was built on a really simple, basic idea: a human creator. A person writes a book, paints a picture, they compose a song. They are the author. Simple.
But what happens when that's just not the case anymore? What happens when an algorithm can spit out functional, complex, and you could even say original code from just a simple prompt from a person? The old rulebooks are basically obsolete. And that's exactly why we need to treat this like a real investigation, looking at all the different angles to figure out who really has a claim to what AI creates.
So here's our game plan for this investigation. First up, we're going to look at the sheer scale of this thing in a section we're calling the code writing machine. Then we're going to dig into the powerful arguments being made by the corporate claimants. Yep, we're talking about big tech.
After that, we'll see a totally different perspective with the People's Code, which is all about the world of open source. From there, we're going to try to untangle the brain-twisting legal questions in the human author paradox, and then expose a really fascinating bit of industry hypocrisy we've dubbed the distillation deception.
And all of that evidence is going to lead us straight to our final verdict, a conclusion that really flips the whole debate on its head, this idea of AI as a public trust. All right, let's kick things off with the sheer scale of this because it's pretty hard to wrap your head around. The most important thing to get is that AI has, well, it's graduated. It's not just a simple assistant anymore, it's a genuine creator. It's generating solutions, building apps, and writing code that gets pushed into live systems every single day.
And you know what happens when you have that level of creation? A massive market follows. We are watching a gold rush happen in real time, an explosion of investment and innovation that is just about unprecedented.
I mean, just look at the speed of this growth. According to Bloomberg Intelligence, the AI market is set to more than double in just 2 years. We're talking about it blowing past $400 billion by 2027. This isn't some niche tool for techies anymore. This is an entire economic sector being built on this brand new foundation of machine creation.
But Bob, this is exactly where that Wild West idea comes in. This incredible gold rush is taking place in a territory with no laws, no sheriff, no rules. And we're already seeing the first big legal shootouts. Just think about that recent case out in California, where a software company used an AI tool to build a new algorithm, only to get sued by a competitor claiming the AI had perfectly copied huge proprietary chunks of their own protected code.
That is a total nightmare scenario. I mean, who's on the hook there? The company that used the tool, the one that made the tool, the AI itself? It just throws a massive wrench into the most basic definitions of originality and infringement. And, you know, facing exactly that kind of chaos, the tech giants are doing what they always do. They're building legal fortresses. They are pouring unbelievable resources into developing these complicated strategies to control the code their AI systems pump out, to claim ownership of it, and let's be honest, most importantly, to shield themselves from huge legal and financial risks.
That's right. They're trying to tame this Wild West for themselves, basically building walls and staking claims on all the territory before any government can even think about drawing a map.
And you can see two really different philosophies at play here, but they're both aimed at control. Microsoft is taking this very technological approach. They're building what's essentially a high-tech legal shield, using these advanced scanners to look for what they call license contamination. That's a fancy term for when the AI accidentally pulls in snippets of open-source code that have restrictive licenses, which could put their whole product at legal risk.
So they're trying to scrub the output clean before they use it. Meanwhile, Google is being even more careful. They're creating these internal firewalls, basically walling off their most valuable code, their crown jewels, from their own AI tools. It just goes to show you, they absolutely see the power in this, but they are also deeply, deeply worried about that legal contamination you just mentioned, Sue.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. But you know, Bob, for all their cleverness, these are just defensive moves. They're policies meant to manage risk, but they completely dance around the core, fundamental question that we all have to be asking.
This right here, this is the absolute heart of our entire investigation from OOTTO TV. It's one thing to make an internal corporate policy to protect your own stuff. It's a whole other thing to claim you fundamentally own something that a person and a machine created together. That's the perfect way to frame it. I mean, sure, the corporations built the tool, but who owns the foundational stuff that makes the tool even work? Who owns the language models that were trained on public data? Who owns the universal principles of math, the very logic of the system? If you don't own the foundation, how can you possibly claim you own everything that's built on top of it? It's like trying to build a castle on land that you don't even own.
And you know, Sue, that point about building on land you don't own is the perfect bridge to the other major player in this whole ownership fight, the open source community. And we have to be really clear here. This isn't just a different way of doing business. It is a completely different philosophical universe when you start talking about knowledge, creation, and ownership.
It's a direct challenge, a total counterpoint to that corporate fortress building we were just talking about.
What's so fascinating and honestly so radical here is this idea of distributed ownership. In the open source world, if you ask, hey, who owns this? The answer isn't a single name like Microsoft or Google. The answer is everyone who contributed. The ownership is held by the entire community, together. Which means no one person or company can just claim exclusive rights or lock it all down, because the whole project is built on the shared collective work of thousands of individual contributors from all over the world. It is the exact opposite of that top-down walled garden model.
And this slide just lays out the central conflict we're dealing with perfectly. The proprietary model that big tech loves is basically a closed garden. It's all about central control, keeping secrets, and making as much profit as possible. The open source model, that's more like a public park. It's designed from the ground up to be decentralized, totally transparent, and to create a shared benefit for everyone.
And that brings us right back to the core tension, doesn't it, Bob? Is this incredible, revolutionary technology a private asset to be owned and squeezed for profit by a handful of giant companies? Or is it a public resource to be shared, improved, and developed by all of us?
And that question right there just drags us straight into this wild legal paradox. Like we said earlier, copyright law for centuries was built on this one simple, elegant idea: human authorship. A person has a creative idea, they make something, and they own it. It was pretty straightforward.
But AI just blows that simplicity to bits. It injects a non-human creator into the mix, and now legal systems all over the world are scrambling to figure out what that even means. And as you might guess, they're coming up with answers that are completely at odds with each other.
You can literally see the global confusion right here on this table. The United Kingdom, believe it or not, kind of saw this coming. Their copyright law from all the way back in 1988 has a special section just for computer-generated works. It basically says the author is the person by whom the arrangements necessary for the creation of the work are undertaken.
Right, so in the UK, it's about who set the whole process in motion. But the United States is taking the exact opposite view. The U.S. Copyright Office has been crystal clear. If there's no human author, there's no copyright protection. Full stop. They just recently refused to grant a copyright for an award-winning piece of AI art, even though the artist argued he went through this really painstaking, iterative process of prompting and refining. The office basically said the AI's part in it was too unpredictable for the human to be the true mastermind.
But it's so tricky, and actually a really fascinating court case out of China from the Beijing Internet Court has given us what might be the most thoughtful framework yet for figuring out human authorship in this new AI era.
Okay, so what this court is saying is that a simple, lazy prompt like, hey, make me a picture of a cat on a roof, probably isn't going to cut it if you want to be called the author. To claim ownership, you need to act more like a film director than just some person shouting out an idea. Exactly. You have to provide specific intellectual input, not just some vague idea. You have to make deliberate choices in how you arrange your prompts and set the parameters, choices that you can actually see in the final work. And finally, your process, all that back and forth, the tweaking, the refining, it has to show your unique, personal, creative judgment. It's really the difference between just commissioning a painting versus using a very, very advanced new paintbrush to create one yourself.
But you know, this whole debate over who owns what gets even murkier and honestly a lot more cynical when we pull back the curtain and see how these gigantic AI models are actually built in the first place. There's this really controversial technique being used that's at the center of a new, high-stakes fight between companies.
Oh yeah, this is where things get really, really hypocritical, Bob.
Okay, so AI distillation might sound super technical, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's a clever shortcut. Instead of spending billions of dollars and years training a massive AI model from scratch on raw data, you can create a smaller student model. Then you train it by just feeding it questions and, most importantly, the answers from a bigger, pre-existing teacher model. The student basically just learns to copy the teacher's thought process.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. And this very technique, Sue, is at the heart of a massive controversy that's brewing right now. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is publicly investigating a smaller company called DeepSeek, accusing them of doing this exact thing.
So the story goes like this. This company, DeepSeek, comes out of nowhere with this incredibly powerful new AI that rivals ChatGPT, but they somehow developed it for a tiny fraction of the cost. So OpenAI immediately cries foul. They're basically suggesting they must have been distilling ChatGPT's outputs to train their own model on the cheap. And look, on the surface, it sounds like a pretty open and shut case of intellectual property theft, right? If what they're saying is true, DeepSeek basically just copied OpenAI's homework to get a good grade. But here is the massive, glaring, hypocritical twist in this whole story. And this is it's astounding. The argument OpenAI is using against DeepSeek is the complete opposite of the argument it's using to defend itself. Right now, OpenAI is being sued by the New York Times and a whole bunch of authors for training its models on millions of their copyrighted articles without paying them or getting permission. And OpenAI's entire legal defense in that case hangs on one single idea: fair use. It's unbelievable. So their position is that it's fair use when they scrape the entire public internet, our articles, our books, our code, our art, to build their multi-billion-dollar products, but it's IP theft when a smaller company allegedly uses their public outputs to do the exact same thing. They absolutely want to have their cake and eat it too. And it just completely destroys their moral and legal authority to act like they're the rightful owners of this technology. And that hypocrisy brings us to the final and I think most provocative part of our investigation for OOTO TV. When you put all the evidence together, the legal chaos, the fact that these things are built on public data, the creative work of individual users, that collaborative philosophy of open source, you have to step back and ask a much bigger, more fundamental question about what AI even is.
And you know, Bob, all the evidence we've looked at today points overwhelmingly in one direction. The answer is yes. Is the public the powerhouse of AI? The builders, the architects? Absolutely. These incredibly powerful AI models, they aren't born in some corporate vacuum. They are trained on the collective knowledge of all of humanity. Our language, our stories, our art, our science, our code, all of it scraped from the internet. So much of that foundational material is either already in the public domain or it's part of the huge open source commons built by millions of people over decades. The public literally provides the raw material. This just reframes the entire conversation. If AI is built on common language, public knowledge, public mathematics, and built on an open source code base, is the public the rightful owners of AI code base? It's a powerful question. How can a private for-profit company build a skyscraper on that public foundation and then turn around and claim they own not just the building, but the land under it and the sky above it too? This isn't just an academic question, Sue. It hits at the very core of who is going to benefit from this incredible technological revolution.
And it goes even deeper than that, Bob. Does the public mass population, as populations and users of AI, own their input and output? Because think about it. If the public provides the raw data for training, and then individual users like you and me provide that creative spark, the specific prompts, the intellectual input, that personal judgment we were talking about, then a really powerful argument comes into focus. The public and its users are co-creators at every single step of the way.
Which leads us to a conclusion that's pretty much unavoidable. The current setup, where a handful of tech companies claim absolute singular ownership over this massive collective creation, is just not sustainable.
It's not tenable, and frankly, it's not just.
This really feels like the logical endpoint of all the evidence. AI's inherent dependency on individual public contributors requires governmental regulation to define AI as a public trust, with broad public ownership of the code base and each individual as owner of the output. This isn't a product to be owned like a smartphone. It's much more like a basic utility, like the power grid, or a shared natural resource, like our oceans. Its very existence depends on the public commons.
And if that's the case, it needs to be governed like one. And that means broad public ownership of the core technology and clear, undeniable ownership for every single individual over their own creative inputs and, most importantly, their outputs.
And if we accept that idea, Bob, it means the whole story being pushed so hard by big tech is just fundamentally wrong. Tech's promotion of themselves as owners of AI is a fraud that must be regulated to provide AI that is public and unbiased, free and ethical. The claim that they are the sole owners is a really convenient and incredibly profitable story they tell their shareholders, but based on all the evidence we've seen, it's a fiction. And to make sure this technology actually serves everyone, not just a few corporate giants, it has to be regulated in a way that reflects its true public nature. What our investigation has really shown, Sue, is the need for nothing less than a complete paradigm shift in how we even think about digital ownership.
Which leaves us, and all of you, with one final and really crucial question to think about. If AI is the public trust, how do we build the systems and laws to govern it, not as a corporate asset, but as a shared global resource?
You know, accepting that AI is a public trust is the first huge step. But the next and much harder step is figuring out what that actually looks like in the real world. How do we build the global institutions, the new legal frameworks, and the ethical guardrails to manage this technology as a resource for all of humanity? That, Bob, is the immense challenge that is waiting for all of us.